Blood dripped steadily onto the linoleum, pacing the erratic thumping of a 7-year-old's heart, hiding under a dusty twin bed. Desperate, trembling fingers tapped out a plea for help to a wrong number. Miles away, a phone buzzed inside a Health Angels clubhouse. A hardened biker read it, and everything changed. Dust motes danced in the pale sliver of moonlight filtering through the bedroom blinds, but 7-year-old Lily kept her eyes squeezed shut. If she couldn't see the dark, maybe the monsters in it couldn't see her. But the monster wasn't under the bed. He was downstairs in the kitchen. His name was Rick. He had moved into their modest single-story home in Vallejo, California, 6 months ago, bringing with him the sharp, sour smell of cheap whiskey and a temper that struck like a rattlesnake. Tonight the explosion had come without warning. It started over a misplaced set of car keys. Then came the shouting, the heavy thud of a chair being kicked across the room, and finally the sound that would haunt Lily for the rest of her life. A sickening, dry snap, followed by her mother's agonizing, breathless scream. Underneath the mattress, surrounded by forgotten shoe boxes and dust bunnies, Lily clutched a shattered, hand-me-down iPhone. Her mother, Sarah, had given it to her strictly for emergencies, loaded only with a prepaid plan and the number for her Aunt Claire. "If things get bad, Lilybug," Sarah had whispered weeks ago, hiding the bruises on her neck beneath a scarf. "You text Aunt Claire. You understand?" Things were bad now. They were worse than bad. Downstairs, the screaming had stopped, replaced by Sarah's low, wet sobbing and Rick's guttural pacing. He was cursing, blaming Sarah for making him do it, his heavy work boots striking the floorboards like thunderclaps. Lily unlocked the phone. Her hands were shaking so violently she dropped it twice. She pulled up the messaging app, tears blurring her vision. She remembered Aunt Claire's number. She recited it in her head every night before sleep. Area code 510. But in her blind panic, her tiny thumb slipped on the cracked glass. Instead of ending in an 8, she hit the 9. She typed fast, ignoring the auto-correct mistakes, pouring all her terror into the digital keyboard. "Just come." He broke Mum's arm. "She's crying. I'm hiding under bed. Don't let him find me." She hit send. The green bubble popped up, indicating it had gone through. Lily pulled her knees to her chest, praying Aunt Claire would hurry. She didn't know that Aunt Claire's phone was sitting silently on a nightstand in Sacramento, completely devoid of any new messages. 30 miles south, tucked away in an industrial zone of Oakland, the atmosphere was a stark contrast to the suffocating terror of Lily's bedroom. The local Hells Angels clubhouse was a fortress of concrete, steel doors, and high chain-link fences topped with razor wire. Inside, the air was thick with cigarette smoke, the heavy scent of leather, and the loud, boisterous laughter of men who lived their lives by their own ruthless code. Sitting at the scarred wooden bar was Silas Gallagher. Everyone called him Bear. Standing 6'4" and built like a brick wall, Bear was a 30-year veteran of the club. His arms were sleeves of faded ink, and his heavy leather cut bore the iconic winged, death-head the world-famous insignia of the Hells Angels Motorcycle Club. Bear was not a man to be trifled with. He had survived federal indictments, rival gang wars, and the harsh realities of the outlaw life. Beneath his sprawling salt and pepper beard was a face lined with hard miles and darker memories. Bear was mid-conversation with Dutch Vanderwall, a heavily tattooed brother from the Nomads chapter, when his phone vibrated against the bar top. Frowning, Bear picked it up. He squinted at the screen, expecting a text from one of the prospects about a parts run. Instead, he saw the desperate misspelled plea from an unknown number. "Please come. He broke Mum's arm. She is crying. I'm hiding under bed. Don't let him find me." K. Bear stared at the glowing letters. In the outlaw world, a random text could be a setup, a sting operation by law enforcement, or a rival club trying to draw them out. His instinct, honed by decades of paranoia and survival, told him to delete it and crush the phone. But he didn't. Something about the raw, unpolished panic in the words caught in his throat. He broke Mum's arm. The phrase acted like a time machine, ripping Bear backward through the decades to a dark, cramped trailer in Nevada. He was 6 years old again, hiding in a closet, listening to his father systematically dismantle his mother's face while the police refused to intervene. The phantom sound of his own mother crying echoed in his ears, drowning out the classic rock blaring from the clubhouse jukebox. Bear's massive, calloused thumb hovered over the screen. He typed back, his movements deliberate. "Who is this? Who are you trying to reach?" Under the bed, Lily's phone buzzed. She almost screamed, clamping a hand over her own mouth. She looked at the screen. It wasn't Aunt Claire. Aunt Claire always replied with heart emojis. Trembling, she typed, Lily. "I need Aunt Claire. Rick is mad. He hurt Mummy. Please help me, Aunt Claire." Bear felt a cold, heavy knot form in his stomach. It wasn't a trap, it was a terrified kid in the dark. The hardened outlaw, a man who had famously walked through a hail of gunfire without flinching, felt an unfamiliar pang of dread. He looked up at the clubhouse clock. It was nearly midnight. If he handed this off to the police, by the time dispatch routed the call, ran a trace on a prepaid burner, and sent out a squad car, Rick might have finished the job. Bear knew exactly how these domestic situations ended. He had the scars on his soul to prove it. Bear typed rapidly. "Lily, listen to me. This isn't Aunt Claire. You have the wrong number. But I am going to help you. What is your address? Where do you live?" "Ah, in Vallejo." Lily read the message. Her breathing hitched. A stranger. She was talking to a stranger. Her mother had always warned her about strangers. But down in the kitchen, a new sound began. Rick was opening drawers, slamming them shut. He was looking for something. "Where's the brat, Sarah?" Sarah's voice slurred, laced with venom. "She needs to learn some respect, too." "No, Rick, leave her alone, please," Sarah pleaded, her voice choked with pain. "She's asleep. Just leave her." Lily didn't care about the stranger rule anymore. She needed anyone. She typed out the only address she had memorized since they moved. 400 Intel's Court, Vallejo. "Please hurry. He is looking for me." Bear stared at the address. Vallejo. He knew the layout. It was a straight shot of Interstate 80. 25 minutes, if he pushed the throttle to the absolute limit. He slid his phone into his denim jacket pocket and stood up. The heavy wooden bar stool scraped loudly against the concrete floor, cutting through the low hum of conversation in the room. Bear reached out and grabbed his helmet. Dutch paused his story, looking at Bear's face. The massive outlaw's eyes had gone completely dead, a terrifying icy calm settling over his features. It was a look the brothers only saw right before things got incredibly violent. "Everything good, brother?" Dutch asked, his hand casually resting near his waist. "Got a situation," Bear rumbled, his voice like gravel grinding together. "Some kid texted me by accident. Mother's getting beaten to death by a coward up in Vallejo. He's looking for the kid now." Dutch didn't ask questions. He didn't ask if it was their business or if they should call the cops. The Brotherhood of the Hells Angels operated on a different wavelength of loyalty and action. If Bear was going, they were going. Dutch stood up, grabbing his leather gloves. Across the room, Iron Mike, the chapter's sergeant-arms, caught the shift in atmosphere and nodded, grabbing his heavy steel chain off a peg by the door. "Mount up," Bear ordered to the room. "We're taking a ride to Elmwood Court." The California night was crisp, the air biting through their denim and leather as the three heavy Harley-Davidson motorcycles tore out of the compound. Bear led the pack, his massive black road glide carving through the midnight traffic on I-80 like a sight. Dutch and Iron Mike flanked him in perfect formation, the thunderous, synchronized roar of their chopped exhausts echoing off the concrete dividers. Bear's mind was a singular laser-focused point of violent intent. He twisted the throttle, pushing the speedometer past 90. The wind tore at his beard, but he didn't feel the cold. He only felt the burning, absolute necessity to reach that address before the clock ran out on a 7-year-old girl. He remembered the layout of the Vallejo suburbs: quiet, manicured streets lined with oak trees and street lamps, places where horrific things happened behind heavy oak doors, while neighbors pretended not to hear. Back at 422 Elmwood Court, the situation had deteriorated into pure nightmare. Rick had abandoned the kitchen. Lily could hear his heavy boots dragging on the carpet of the stairs. Thud, thud, thud. Each step sent a vibration to the floorboards that rattled Lily's teeth. "Lily Pad," Rick called out in a sickeningly sweet, mocking sing-song voice. Come out, wherever you are. Your mommy is taking a nap, and it's time for us to have a little talk." Lily pressed herself completely flat against the floorboards, squeezing her eyes shut so tight they ached. She gripped the phone to her chest. The screen had gone dark. The stranger wasn't coming. It was a mistake. She was entirely alone. Downstairs, Sarah dragged herself toward the bottom of the stairs, her left arm hanging at a grotesque angle. Blood poured from a cut above her eyebrow, blinding her in one eye. "Rick, stop," she wailed, her voice cracking. "I'll call the cops, I swear to God." "You aren't calling anyone, Sarah," Rick yelled down, pausing on the landing. "I smashed the landline, and your cell is in the sink. Now shut up before I come back down and finish the job." He reached the top of the stairs. Lily's bedroom door was directly to the right. She watched, paralyzed, as the doorknob slowly turned. The door swung open, the hallway light spilling into the room and illuminating the edge of her bedspread. Rick stepped into the room. Lily could smell the cheap whiskey and stale sweat radiating off him. She saw his scuffed boots stop just inches from the edge of the bed. If he just crouched down, he would be face to face with her. "Under the bed, huh?" Rick chuckled, a sound devoid of any real humor. Classic. He took a step back, preparing to flip the mattress over entirely. Lily opened her mouth to scream, resigning herself to the inevitable pain. But the scream never left her throat. It started as a low, guttural vibration in the distance, something heavy and powerful tearing through the quiet suburban stillness. Within seconds, the vibration grew into a deafening mechanical roar. It sounded like an earthquake, tearing down the tranquil street of Elmwood Court. The windows in Lily's bedroom physically rattled in their frames. Rick froze, his hands hovering over the mattress. He frowned, irritated by the sudden intrusion of noise. "What the hell is that?" he muttered. He abandoned the bed and walked over to the front window, peeling back the blinds to look out at the street. Down below, the quiet darkness of the neighborhood was shattered by 3 blindingly bright LED headlamps cutting across the meticulously trimmed lawn. The 3 Harley-Davidsons didn't bother parking on the street. Bear led them straight over the curb, their heavy tires tearing deep tracks into the wet grass, stopping inches from the front porch. The engines idled with an aggressive, throaty rumble, dominating the night. Rick stared down, his whiskey-soaked brain struggling to process the scene. 3 massive men, clad in heavy black leather and denim, stepped off their bikes in unison. The streetlights caught the unmistakable death head patches on their backs, the stark white and red lettering spelling out Hell's Angles over the state rocker. Rick's arrogance evaporated, instantly replaced by a cold, suffocating spike of pure terror. He wasn't dealing with a terrified woman or a helpless child anymore. He was staring at the apex predators of the asphalt, and they were walking directly toward his front door. Bear didn't hesitate. He didn't look back at Dutch or Iron Mike. He knew they were right behind him. He stepped onto the wooden porch, the planks groaning under his immense weight. He didn't knock, He didn't ring the doorbell. He raised his heavy, steel-toed motorcycle boot and drove it with pile-driver force into the center of the door, just below the lock. The sound of the door giving way was explosive. The wooden frame splintered, the deadbolt tearing entirely through the jamb as the heavy front door flew open and slammed violently against the interior wall, raining plaster dust onto the entryway floor. Bear stepped inside, ducking slightly to clear the frame. His cold, dead eyes swept the room. He saw the overturned chairs, the shattered glass, and then he saw Sarah. She was crumpled at the base of the stairs, clutching her broken arm, staring up at the giant bikers in absolute shock. Bear looked from the broken woman up to the top of the stairs, where Rick was standing, frozen like a deer caught in the headlights of a freight train. "You, Rick?" Bear's voice was surprisingly quiet, rumbling with a dark, terrifying promise. Rick opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. He took a stumbling step backward. Bear unclasped the leather chin strap of his helmet. "Where's the girl?" Rick's mouth opened and closed like a dying fish, his brain misfiring as he stared down at the towering leather-clad giant ascending his staircase. The whiskey courage that had fueled his rage against a helpless woman and a child evaporated, leaving nothing but a hollow, vibrating terror. Bear took the steps slowly, deliberately. Each heavy footfall of his steel-toed boots echoed through the shattered house like the tolling of an executioner's bell. He didn't rush, he didn't need to. The house was locked down. Downstairs, Iron Mike had already knelt beside Sarah, his massive, heavily tattooed hands surprisingly gentle as he draped his own denim vest over her shivering, battered shoulders. Dutch stood by the broken front door, a silent sentinel, his eyes scanning the quiet suburban street for any sign of flashing red and blue lights. "I asked you a question, coward," Bear rumbled, stopping 2 steps below the landing. His eyes, dark and flat as obsidian, locked onto Rick. "Where is the little girl?" Panic, raw and animalistic, finally broke through Rick's paralysis. He spun around, desperately searching for an advantage, a weapon, an escape route. His eyes landed on a heavy brass-handled umbrella stand near the hallway closet. He grabbed a solid oak walking cane from inside it, gripping it with white-knuckled intensity. He swung back around, raising the makeshift weapon high above his head. "Get the hell out of my house," Rick shrieked, his voice cracking by an octave. "You're trespassing. I'll kill you. I'll kill all of you." Bear didn't even blink. He took the final 2 steps onto the landing, his massive frame eating up the distance in a single stride. Rick brought the heavy oak cane down with all the force his panicked body could muster, aiming directly for Bear's skull. The seasoned Hell's Angel didn't dodge. He simply raised his left forearm. The solid oak struck Bear's leather-clad arm with a loud, sharp crack. The cane snapped completely in half, the broken end clattering uselessly against the drywall. Bear hadn't even flinched. Rick stared at the splintered handle in his hand, a whimpering sound escaping his throat. "My turn," Bear whispered. Bear's right hand shot forward, his thick fingers wrapping entirely around Rick's throat. With a terrifying surge of brute strength, Bear lifted the abuser completely off his feet. Rick's hands desperately clawed at Bear's thick wrists, his legs kicking uselessly in the empty air. Bear slammed him backward against the hallway wall, the impact cracking the plaster and sending framed pictures crashing to the floor. "You like breaking things?" Bear hissed, his face inches from Rick's turning purple visage. The smell of stale whiskey disgusted the biker, reminding him of the ghosts of his own childhood. "You like snapping bones when they belong to people smaller than you? Let's see how you handle someone your own size." Bear dropped Rick, letting the man collapse to his hands and knees, gasping violently for air. Before Rick could even register the relief of oxygen, Bear stepped forward and delivered a single, calculated kick to Rick's ribs. The sickening crunch of bone breaking was loud in the confined space. Rick screamed, curling into a fetal position on the carpet, clutching his side. "That's for the mother," Bear stated coldly. He reached down, grabbing Rick by the collar of his flannel shirt, dragging him down the hallway away from Lily's bedroom door. He threw Rick into the master bathroom, hauling him up so they were face to face in the vanity mirror. Bear's massive fist pulled back and drove directly into Rick's jaw. The abuser crumpled instantly, hitting the tile floor like a dropped bag of cement, out cold before he even landed. And that, Bear muttered, stepping over the unconscious man, is for making the kid hide. Leaving Rick bleeding and unconscious on the bathroom tiles, Bear turned his attention back to the hallway. He stopped, taking a deep, ragged breath. He had to compartmentalize the rage. He had to switch off the violent outlaw and turn back into the protector. He closed his eyes, forcing his heart rate to slow, unclenching his bruised fists. He walked slowly toward the bedroom where the door stood wide open. The room was pitch black, save for the ambient light bleeding in from the hallway. "Lily?" Bear called out. His voice was entirely different now. The gravelly, menacing growl was gone, replaced by a low, soothing baritone. "Lily, it's Bear. I'm the guy from the text messages." The wrong number. Silence hung in the room. Underneath the dusty twin bed, Lily was frozen. She had heard the crash, the yelling, the terrifying thud of bodies hitting the walls. She squeezed her phone so tightly her fingers ached. Was this a trick? Was Rick making a weird voice? "I know you're scared, little one," Bear continued, stepping cautiously into the room. He deliberately made his footfalls heavy so she would know exactly where he was. He stopped in the center of the rug and slowly sank to his knees. The joints in his knees popped loudly in the quiet room. He placed his massive hands flat on the floor, making himself as unthreatening as a man of his size possibly could. "Your mom is downstairs," Bear said softly. "She's safe. My friend Mike is taking care of her. The bad man is taking a nap in the bathroom. He's not going to hurt you ever again, I promise." Lily's breath hitched. She peered through the darkness, past the drooping edge of the bedspread. She saw two enormous black boots, and then, as she angled her head, she saw the silhouette of the giant kneeling on her rug. He looks like a mountain. Trembling, she slid the glowing screen of her cracked phone out from under the bed. The faint blue light illuminated Bear's face. She saw the sprawling gray beard, the heavy tattoos creeping up his neck, the leather vest with the scary skull with wings. He looked exactly like the villains from her cartoons. But his eyes, when the phone light caught his eyes, they were incredibly sad and incredibly gentle. "Are you the police?" Lily whispered, her voice barely a squeak. Bear offered a small, sad smile. "No, sweetheart, I'm not the police. I'm just a guy who got a message from a very brave little girl who needed some backup." Slowly, hesitantly, Lily crawled out from under the bed. She was covered in dust bunnies, her pajamas wrinkled, tears streaking through the grime on her pale cheeks. She stood up, looking incredibly small next to the kneeling biker. Bear didn't reach for her. He let her dictate the distance. Without a word, Lily stepped forward and wrapped her tiny arms around Bear's thick neck, burying her face into his leather vest. Bear froze for a split second, overwhelmed by the absolute, unconditional trust of the gesture. Slowly, he wrapped his massive, heavily tattooed arms around her small frame, hugging her back. "I've got you, kid," Bear whispered, closing his eyes tightly. "You're safe now." Downstairs, the atmosphere was chaotic but controlled. Dutch had his phone out, calmly giving the dispatcher the address of the house. He didn't identify himself. He simply stated there was a severe domestic disturbance, a man unconscious, and a woman needing immediate medical attention. "Make it quick," Dutch told the operator before hanging up and tossing the burner phone onto an armchair. He looked out, the shattered door. Bear. Sirens in the distance. "We got maybe 4 minutes before Vallejo PD swarms this cul-de-sac." Iron Mike was kneeling next to Sarah, holding a clean rag he had found in the kitchen against the gash on her forehead. Sarah was still in shock, her eyes wide as she stared at the terrifying men who had just saved her life. "Why?" Sarah gasped, wincing as a jolt of pain shot through her broken arm. Why are you doing this? Mike, a man who had spent 5 years in San Quentin, offered her a surprisingly warm smile. Your daughter has good aim with a keypad, ma'am. Bear got her text. The club doesn't tolerate cowards who hit women. Simple as that. Heavy footsteps on the stairs drew their attention. Bear emerged, carrying Lily in his left arm as easily as if she weighed nothing at all. Lily rested her head on his broad shoulder, her eyes heavy with exhaustion, but devoid of the stark terror from before. Sarah burst into fresh tears at the sight of her daughter. Lily. Oh, thank God. Bear gently set Lily down next to her mother. The little girl carefully hugged Sarah's uninjured side. Bear looked at the two of them, the broken woman and the brave kid. It was a picture he had seen too many times, a cycle of violence that usually only ended in tragedy. Not tonight. Listen to me closely, Sarah, Bear said, his voice returning to its commanding, gravelly tone. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, heavy metal business card. He pressed it into her good hand. When the cops get here, you tell them everything Rick did to you. You tell them he fell down the stairs in a drunken rage. You never mention us. You never saw us. Sarah looked at the card. It had a single phone number embossed on it, nothing else. If he ever gets out, Bear continued, locking eyes with Sarah. If he ever so much as drives past your street, you call that number. You understand? We will handle it. He is done bothering you. Sarah nodded frantically, tears streaming down her bruised face. I understand. Thank you. Thank you so much. Bear knelt down one last time, looking at Lily. He reached up to the lapel of his heavy leather cut. Pinned to the collar was a small silver medallion, a winged skull, a token of protection earned over decades of loyalty to the Hell's Angels. He unclasped it and gently pinned it to the collar of Lily's dusty pajama top. You keep this, Lilybug, Bear said softly, using the nickname her mother used. This means you're under club protection now. Nobody messes with you. You're the bravest kid I ever met. Lily touched the cold silver of the pin. Thank you, Bear. Time to ride, brother, Dutch called out, the wail of police sirens now distinctly audible over the idle of their motorcycles outside. They just turned onto the main avenue. Bear stood up, his joints popping again. He gave Sarah one last nod before turning on his heel. The three massive outlaws strode out the shattered front door, completely ignoring the destruction they had left in their wake. They swung their legs over their heavy Harley-Davidsons. Engines roared to life, shattering the quiet night once more. By the time the first two Vallejo police cruisers turned onto Elmwood Court, their blue and red lights painting the neighborhood in chaotic flashes, the three bikers were already gone, vanishing into the California darkness like phantoms. The police rushed the house with weapons drawn, only to find a shattered door, a weeping mother holding her child, and a severely beaten abuser unconscious on the bathroom floor. Rick was arrested, heavily handcuffed to a gurney, and hauled away. He never spoke a word about the bikers to the police. He knew better. He knew that the men who broke down his door weren't bound by laws, warrants, or jurisdictions. Months passed. The physical wounds healed. Sarah pressed full charges, and with Rick's extensive prior record, the judge threw the book at him. They moved out of Vallejo, finding a quiet little duplex in a safer town near Sacramento, closer to the real Aunt Claire. Life returned to a peaceful, predictable rhythm. But Lily never forgot that night. On a bright, sunny Tuesday afternoon, Lily was playing in the front yard of their new duplex. A heavy package was sitting on the front porch, delivered earlier that morning by a private courier. Sarah had opened it, her hands trembling as she saw what was inside. Lily ran up to the porch. What is it, Mom? Sarah lifted a tiny, perfectly tailored black leather jacket from the box. On the back, meticulously stitched in white and red, was a small rocker that read Honorary. Tucked into the front pocket was a brand new, top-of-the-line smartphone. and at the bottom of the box was a single, handwritten note on heavy cardstock. Just checking in. Keep hitting the right numbers, kid. Bear. Lily smiled, touching the silver-winged pin she still wore every single day. She looked down the street, and for a brief second she thought she heard the low, distant rumble of a heavy motorcycle engine carrying on the wind. Salvation doesn't always arrive wearing a badge or a halo. Sometimes it crashes through the front door wearing heavy leather and riding a Harley Davidson. A single wrong digit turned a nightmare into a testament of unlikely guardianship. Bear and his brothers proved that true heroes often walk in the shadows, reminding us that family isn't just blood, it's whoever answers your cry for help in the absolute darkest of nights.